Hello everyone, myself Astha Verma and I am working as a nursing tutor cum clinical instructor in the Department of Medical Surgical Nursing in Rama College of Nursing, Kanpur. So today I am going to deal with a neurological disorder that is meningitis. So as we all know that it is a neurological disorder and meningitis is formed from two words, that one is meninge and second one is itis. The one thing you have to remember that wherever you find the word itis, it simply means to the inflammation. So meningitis is formed from the two words meninge and itis. Meninge is the layer of the brain, that is the covering of the brain, and itis is the inflammation. So if we talk about the meningitis, it is an acute inflammation of the meningeal layer of the brain, and itis is the inflammation. So meningitis is an acute inflammation of meningeal layer of brain, either caused by any type of bacteria, virus or any other type of microorganisms. Okay, so next we come to the etiological factors. What are the causating factors that leads to the inflammation of the meninges? So first, if we talk about meningitis, it is mainly caused by the bacterial infection. And bacterial infection, it is mainly caused by two types of bacteria. First one is the streptococcus and second one is the Neisseria meningitidis. Okay. So next viral infection. In viral infection, there are too many viruses that are leading for the inflammation of the brain. So here is herpes simplex virus and mumps virus that can lead to the meningitis. Next one is the fungal infection. Any type of fungal infection or any other type of infection can lead to the meningitis. And next it is inflammatory disease. If we talk about the inflammatory disease, it is well known that if there is any disorder of the ENT means ear, nose and throat disorders. If there is presence of otitis media, any upper respiratory tract infections like pharyngitis, laryngitis. Okay, so if there is any type of inflammatory disease, that can lead to the meningitis. Next one is head trauma. If any person has experienced any type of accident, that can also lead to the meningitis. In previous history or in previous time of life, any person has experienced any type of head injury, so in future it can lead to the meningitis also. Next one is the spinal injury. If any person has experienced in the previous time of life with the spinal cord injury, so as a complication in the future time, it can lead to the meningitis. And next one is the cancer. If any person has any type of cancer in the body or presence of cancerous cells in the body, that can also lead to the meningitis. So next there are some risk factors also that can lead to the meningitis. So if you talk about the risk factors, some are systemic infections. Systemic infections in the sense, if there is any type of presence of bacteria in the body, so presence of systemic infections can also lead to the meningitis. And if next is, if any persons have extra use of tobaccos, like a prolonged use of tobaccos, and he is having a continuous use of tobaccos in his life, so it can also lead to the meningitis. And next is the important, that is impaired immunity. If any person has immunocompromised, means he has having less immunities, that means he is not able to fight with the external infections. He is not able to fight if there is any type of infections present in the blood. He is not able to fight with that type of organisms. So he will be surrounded with many type of infections. So if any person is having impaired immunity or immunocompromised, it can lead to the meningitis also. And last one is the vaccine withdrawal. If in the childhood time or he has withdrawn from the vaccination period, so it can also lead to the meningitis. Okay, so that's all about the first we discussed about the definition, then etiological factors, and next we have already discussed about risk factors. So next we are coming to the clinical features, how we are able to find which type of sign and symptoms are shown in the case of meningitis. So if we are talking that meningitis is an inflammation, so we all know that inflammation shows already infections. ठीक, okay. So in clinical manifestations we will found here fever, because if there is any inflammation in the body, there is the presence of fever. And next, there are three prominent signs of meningitis. First one is knuckle rigidity, second one is Brudzinski sign, and third one is the Kerning sign. These three are the main important signs of meningitis. What is knuckle rigidity? Knuckle rigidity is the stiffness of the neck. If you are examining the patient and if you are asking the patient to move the head, so in the case of meningitis, the patient is not able to move his head around. So we will talk that the person is having knuckle rigidity of or stiffness of the neck. Second is the prominent sign, that is Brudzinski sign. What is Brudzinski sign? Brudzinski sign is the flexion of thigh upon flexion of neck. How will you diagnose that, or how will you find that this is positive sign? Okay, so you are having a patient, then you will ask the patient to be in a supine position. Then the patient is when is in a supine position, you will just put a hand in the below of the neck and you will then move the neck towards the chest. Means you are having flexion of the neck, and when you are having flexion of the neck, there is an automatic flexion of the thigh. So if we are having this type of symptom, then we will say conformably that the positive Brudzinski sign is present there. Okay, next prominent sign is Kerning sign. What is Kerning sign? Kerning sign is a resistance to passive extension of the knee with the hip flexed. So how will you find the Kerning sign is positive? You will just lie the patient in a supine position and you have to just put your hand below the leg. And what have to do? You just place the hand below the leg and try to flex the leg towards the stomach part. And when you flex the leg toward the stomach part, the patient is not able to do extension of the leg. So he is having pain in the calf muscles when he try to extend his leg back. So then we will say that Kerning sign is positive. So these are the three prominent signs: knuckle rigidity, Brudzinski sign and Kerning sign. Apart from that, there are much more clinical manifestations like photophobia. What is photophobia? It is the presence of fear from light, and there may be presence of vomiting, seizures, and in severe cases there may be presence of coma also. And one more thing is there, that in the case of meningitis, the person is having disorientation. Means what is disorientation? The person is not able to orient with the surroundings. If you ask him what is the time, what is the place, and where are you living, he is not able to answer. Means he is not oriented with the place, time and persons. So that was all about the clinical manifestations. Then we comes to the diagnostic evaluation. Means how we are going to diagnose, how will we confirm that the person is suffering from the meningitis. So first we have to take the history taking. Means we have to take the thorough history of the patients. Next we can do a thorough physical examination. So this is the important. When we are going through the physical examination of the patient, we will find the three main prominent sign of meningitis. You will find the knuckle rigidity, you will find positive Brudzinski sign, and you will find the positive Kerning sign, that we can diagnose that the person is suffering from the meningitis. Okay, next we can do CT scanning, MRI. What is CT scanning? It is a type of computed tomography. Next we can do also MRI. MRI means magnetic resonance imaging, and PET, positron emission tomography. That CT scanning, MRI and PET we will do for the confirmation if there is any presence of tumor cells, and so through these testing we can confirmly say how they are growing, what are the pathophysiology of the tumor is present there. Next we can do blood culture. Through the blood culture examination we can identify which type of bacteria, virus is growing there, what is affecting and what is going to lead the meningitis symptoms. Next we can do CSF analysis, means cerebrospinal fluid. We just take a sample of cerebrospinal fluid and it will go through the laboratory, and then we will diagnose what is the volume and what is the where and what is the presence of CSF. And lastly, we will go through the neurological examination. Neurological examination, we just take Glasgow Coma Scaling. In Glasgow Coma Scaling, we just have to identify EVM, eye response, verbal response and motor response. Okay. So this is all about the diagnostic evaluation. Then we comes to the pathophysiology. So how it is affecting the body and how it is growing inside the body. So in pathophysiology, firstly there is any presence of etiological factors. Etiological factors, it may be any reasons. It may be a bacterial infection, viral infection, as we have discussed about the etiological factors. Head trauma, spinal injury, whatever the reason is. So due to etiological factors, the causative organism enters into the bloodstream. Okay, it's just a simply through the bloodstream, the bacteria or virus, whatever the reason, it just enters into the bloodstream. Then it crosses the blood-brain barrier and there is a proliferation inside the CSF, means cerebrospinal fluid. When it just enters into the bloodstream, it just go through the brain and it crosses the blood-brain barrier and it started to proliferate inside the cerebrospinal fluid. Next, what the come? There is CSF. You know about CSF, it just circulates between the meninges. There is a space between the meninges and there is a circulation of a fluid CSF. So CSF, when it is circulating inside the subarachnoid space, so there is an inflammation. There is a facilitated inflammation inside the layers of the meninges, and so because of the inflammation there is an increased ICP. So what is ICP? It is intracranial pressure. What is intracranial pressure? Intracranial pressure is the pressure that is exerted by the blood tissues, cells and CSF. Okay, so there is a increased condition of ICP, increased intracranial pressure. So whenever there is a presence of any type of inflammation, there is a cellular response. So whatever the cellular response occurs, there is an accumulation of exudates. So these type of exudates that is accumulated inside the spaces that leads to the causing of meningitis. So it's just a simple pathophysiology of meningitis. Okay, last we come to the management. How we are going to manage with the condition of meningitis? First, we can manage it through the pharmacological management, in which we have to use the drugs. And next one is the non-pharmacological management. So first we will discuss about the pharmacological management. In pharmacological management, we just have to use some antibiotics if there is presence of bacteria in causing the meningitis. So if there is presence of bacteria, then we will have to prescribe antibiotics like ampicillin, penicillins, and second antiviral. If there is presence of virus, then we will give antiviral drugs like tenofovir and etc. Next, if there is a presence of fungal infection, then we will have to prescribe antifungals like fluconazole, etc. we will can provide. And next one is the important, that is anti-inflammatory drugs like corticosteroids we can prescribe here, like example dexamethasone we can give here. Apart from that, there are much more symptoms of the meningitis. So we have to reduce the edema, inflammation. So if there is a presence of increased ICP condition, we have to prescribe the mannitol. Okay, what will mannitol do? It will help to reduce the edematous condition. It will help to in the diuresis condition. Okay, if there is a presence of fever, then we will have to prescribe the antipyretics drugs. Okay, so that was all about the pharmacological management. Okay, what is we can do in a non-pharmacological management? We have to maintain the fluid electrolyte balance, because in the condition of meningitis there is an loss of fluids and accumulation of fluid is inside the CSF. So through the use of IV fluid therapy, intravenous fluid therapy, we can manage the fluid electrolyte balance. Okay, second one, the important thing is that we can do NG feeding if the patient is not able to feed himself or herself. So we have to insert and nasogastric tubing, and then we will feed the patient with the nasogastric tubings. And last one is the vitamin supplementation. Okay, in vitamin supplementation, whatever the supplements are required for this condition, we have to provide the patient all these supplements. Okay, and last one thing is the positioning. We have to maintain the proper positioning of the patient. That is very compulsory for the comfort. So in the condition of meningitis, we can do head end elevation. Okay, what is head end elevation? We just have to extend the head of the patient. Okay, so 30 to 45 degree head end elevation can be done to relieve the symptoms of the meningitis. So this is all about the meningitis condition, neurological disorders. So what we discussed, firstly we have discussed about the definition, then etiological factors, then risk factors, clinical manifestations, what is the pathophysiology of the meningitis, and how can we diagnose with the condition of the meningitis. And lastly, we have discussed how we are going to manage the symptoms of the meningitis condition through the use of drugs and without the use of drugs, means using the pharmacological management and non-pharmacological management. And last we discussed about the management through the use of pharmacological and non-pharmacological management. So that was all about the meningitis, that is the neurological disorders. Okay, thank you.